A lot of people talk about the Christian ethic of helping others, but seldom do we find an individual who actually lives a life of charity. Our next dimension is about such a man. Cordell Anderson has spent the last 14 years helping the Indians of Guatemala overcome centuries of deprivation.
The natives have called it Valparaiso for as long as anyone can remember, through generations and perhaps even centuries. Valparaiso, a Spanish word that means Paradise Valley. Valparaiso is in Guatemala's Central Highlands, a lush green valley near the city of Coban, and it's home for a native Utahn who is devoting his life to helping the Indians of this region battle poverty, illiteracy, and malnutrition. In 1967, Cordell Anderson, his wife Maria, and their 4 children loaded everything they could onto a pickup truck, left their comfortable home in Provo, Utah, and with their life savings of $4,700, headed for Guatemala.
The idea was to try and come and live among the Indians and see if we couldn't learn a way where we could really help them have a good life.
Through 14 years of hard work and unbelievable personal sacrifice, Anderson's idea has evolved from vague idealism into a practical and effective program for helping the Indians. His Center for Indian Development is considered by many to be a model self-help project.
The purpose was to create a little community that would be a model showing that this at least is one very, very effective way in helping Indians become a blossoming people. Other than that, a place where people could come and learn and then go back into their areas and be a stimulus, be catalysts for development.
Valparaiso is a 400-acre plantation owned by Anderson but operated by the Indians. The dairy is one of the largest and most progressive in the entire region. The chicken operation supplies poultry products for much of the Coban area. Anderson has taught the Indians to grow more nutritional food. He's helped them build more suitable houses. And he's established a school to combat illiteracy.
It's the first step in progress of any kind. You have to become dissatisfied with what you've got. And so we first try and point out to them, hey, you've got some problems. A lot of Indians don't realize that. To them, it's very normal and natural for half of their children to die before they're 6 years old. We're teaching them that it doesn't need to be that way, that it isn't that way in other places of the world. And so we're trying to breed into them a dissatisfaction with their present condition. And then, of course, follow that up with a program to help them have something different. Generally, the Indians live in homes that you wouldn't even want to put your animals in back in the United States. Homes that are dark, damp, black inside, no windows. Ventilation, some because the smoke they have their fire on an open fire on the floor, and the smoke just filters up through the thatched roof. But the thatched roof, of course, flakes off all the time. The inside is coated with black soot. The animals are in and out. They have no water in their homes, of course. They have no outhouses. 95% of the Indians in this country don't have an outhouse. They just do it out around the house, in the cornfields and whatnot. ¿Y la niña aquí? ¿Cuánto?
Va para 3 años.
Para 3 años.
So what's he telling us?
Okay, yeah, excuse me, I got to translate here, don't I? They've had 6 children, 4 of them are still alive, 2 have died. And then there's these 2 little ones. This one here is 11 months old. And this one here, I can't remember whether he said how old this one was. Yeah. One with a dirty little face. Well, I guess they all have that.
So there's, would this be a typical home?
Yeah, relatively typical. There's a good chance, of course, that these little ones might not survive, as 50% of their children don't. But so far, they've got 67% of their children are still alive. So 2 have died.
Malnutrition is chronic among most Guatemalan Indians. 90% of their diet consists of white corn tortillas. The inadequate diet coupled with poor sanitation results in constant sickness.
A lot of our Indians say that their stomach has always hurt from the time first they can remember. it always hurts. That just seems normal to them. And so intestinal infection is almost 100%.
At Valparaiso, conditions are changing. The signs of progress of a better life abound.
This home was one of the first experimental Indian-style homes, but built up on a foundation and with a floor and with windows and a screen and a stove inside and a shower and a second floor that can be used for a bedroom.
So far, 14 comparatively modern homes have been built at Valparaiso and include such luxuries as electricity, running water, and outhouses. Carlos and Adela Valdez and their 2 children rent this comfortable A-frame home. Anderson says Carlos was a rugged, barefoot kid when they first met 13 years ago. Now Carlos epitomizes the success of Valparaiso.
Compared to the other Pocumtusi Indians, he would be very wealthy. He could make more money elsewhere, quite frankly. But they feel that there are other advantages of being here. And so he sticks it out. And of course, he is going to become one of the owners. He's one that's deserving of it. He helped build the place and he runs it. And so he's going to become, it will be his along with others that are deserving one day soon.
More than 200 people live on the plantation, most in their own homes, but nearly 40 actually live with the Andersons at the Central House. There's Cordell and his wife Maria, 6 of their own 10 children, and an assortment of orphans, widows, and abandoned wives and children.
Seems like I counted the other day, there's something like 25, I believe, that call me Papa here, and this does create some questions among some visitors that don't know what's going on. It was never part of the plan. We never really envisioned that this would be a need. But all of a sudden we're here living with the people. We had an epidemic. Parents died, grandparents died, children were left alone. And so all of a sudden we had no choice but to start taking children into our home. And when the Indians saw us taking these children into our home and treating them just exactly as our own children, wearing the same clothes, sleeping in the same rooms and the same beds, and all of us eating together at a big table and playing together and doing everything together, that's when they started trusting us.
What is your philosophy here with respect to work?
Basically, I guess we could say, if you don't work, you don't eat. That sounds kind of hard, but quite frankly, that's one of the principles these Indians have to be taught. We've found that with a group of Indians, if you once start giving them something for nothing, they're pretty well ruined. There's not much you can do with them from then on. Pretty soon they're not just accepting what they're being given, but they're demanding more and more without being willing to do anything for it.
Though work may be an overriding principle at Valparaiso, play is also an essential ingredient. Anderson's ideal of the good life is a well-rounded life. Valparaiso's soccer team is one of the best in the region, while the man-made 5-acre lake offers recreational opportunities unfamiliar to most Indians.
The lake, that was the first thing we did at Valparaiso. I've always been a fanatic fisherman. So I wanted someplace I could fish. And of course, swimming, boating, and so we produced first of all. It was an area that was very swampy. We couldn't seem to drain it. The cows were always falling in the ditches and almost dying in the mud. And so we finally decided rather than to fight the swamp, let's just fill it up. And so we dammed it up and have our lake.
Much of Anderson's motivation is religious. His first contact with the Indians came as a Mormon missionary in the 1950s. He talks freely about some spiritual experiences during and after his mission that led to his decision to return to Guatemala and devote his life to the Indians. He honestly believes there is a divine purpose for his work.
I don't think I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that.
Still, Anderson has come to accept that his helping role may be more temporal than spiritual.
I think the total solution to the Indian problem has to do with religion as well as everything else. I think it's total development. We've got to do something more than just teach them religion. And so things like health and nutrition and living in better homes and having good work, and of course first receiving vocational education so they'd be qualified for good work. Economic development, all these kind of things became an education, of course, all became sort of the purpose.
Anderson is not without his critics. His zeal for his cause has rubbed some people the wrong way, particularly some leaders in the Mormon Church and even some friends who have supported him financially. One acquaintance describes him as headstrong and uncooperative. Another says he is a strong personality who won't compromise his objectives.
Why do you think people have criticized you for what you're doing?
About the only thing I can think of, I guess, is that it seems as though maybe we're a threat to people, that if what we're doing is right, maybe what the others are doing is not right, and so they have to find something wrong with it. And it wouldn't be very hard to find something wrong with what we're doing. There's problems, there's difficulties, we've had our failures. We're struggling like everybody else is struggling, and so it's easy, I guess, to find something to criticize. I guess some people just feel like they have to find something wrong with it to maybe justify themselves in continuing with their kind of life. I guess we do the same thing. We criticize others to justify what we're doing, so it's human nature, I guess.
Anderson is not insensitive to the criticism, but he's not about to let it interfere with his work. He believes in what he is doing and, after 14 years among the Indians, thinks he has found an effective way of helping them.
Live with them and treat them as brothers and sisters without any discrimination. Be willing to get down to their level, be willing to suffer with them some, and get close enough to them so that you can lift them up.
But not everybody is willing to get down to condescend to the level of an Indian.
No, and we wouldn't want that to happen either, I guess. It would probably have chaos if all of a sudden everybody from the United States came to live with the Indians. So that's not what I'm talking about, but it seems like somebody has got to be out on the front lines.
Cordell Anderson is happy to be on the front line, a front line he hopes will soon expand beyond Valparaiso and into other areas of Guatemala and Latin America. His immediate goal is to have the deserving and qualified Indians at Valparaiso assume ownership and operational control of the plantation. Then Anderson can concentrate his efforts on establishing similar projects in other areas, and one by one help the Indian people find the good life.
Unfortunately, the political climate in Guatemala has deteriorated since we filmed this report last spring. In June, Cordell Anderson was forced to leave the country because of threats against his life. We caught up with him recently at his temporary home in Provo.
We had never considered such a possibility until June of this year, when we started getting negative reports of a very frightening nature from the area, that there were suspicious people that were asking strange questions about me, like which bedroom I slept in. And then we received a threatening note ordering us to do certain things and get out of the country by the 15th of June or I would be executed.
You were threatened with execution, assassination?
That's what the letter says.
Who sent that letter?
It was signed the Guerrilla Army of the Poor, which is one of the two primary leftist groups in the country, guerrilla groups.
Do you believe it was the Guerrilla Army of the Poor that sent this?
In a way, I don't.
Who would have sent it?
The situation in Guatemala is so confusing right now that I could be a target of the extreme left because we are doing things which sort of take away their position of power in the country. It sort of closes the door to them, solves the problems. They don't want the problems to be solved by anybody but themselves, and so we're a threat to them. It could be the extreme right, because the extreme right down there do not like people that are upsetting the status quo. And so it could be from either extreme.
Well, what's the future then, Cordell, of your efforts in Guatemala and think of Valparaiso?
We hope Valparaiso will continue. I couldn't guarantee that. But all the kind of things that we've been doing, we're setting things up so that they will continue. And then my time will be spent in preparing for that hoped-for day when I'll be able to go back and go to work, and I believe really go to work this next time. I really look at our 14 years as being a preparation, and I hope for another 14 years when we'll be able to use this preparation and really being productive. And so my plans will be to prepare.
Anderson hasn't let the execution threat stop his work with the Indians. He maintains close contact with Valparaiso and even gets down there about once a month to check things out. He's also developing a foster home program in Guatemala City and doing field work for another service organization. So Eddie's still very busy in Guatemala.